It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas everywhere you go. Take a look at the 5 and 10. It's glistening once again with candy canes and silver lanes that glow. It's beginning to look a lot like
back
Christmas.
To another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles, where leaders learn from leaders. The holiday season's here, and we come bearing a gift for you today. I'm your host, Chad Fellers, along with my nifty sidekick, Mary Morton. Mary, I know when you think about wondering if you're going to make the naughty or nice list, we already know that it's a foregone conclusion. I hope you get more than a lump of coal in your stocking, but I know that you're happy for the season to be here as well.
Yes, I am. So, I have some news to share real quick.
Oh, sure. Let's do it.
It's no secret that I have children, as I talk about them all the time. I have a 23-year-old daughter, aspiring singer-songwriter. And then my 17-year-old's graduated from high school this year. He wants to get a PhD in meteorology. And he applied to 5 schools. He has now been accepted to 4 of the 5. But of the 4 he's been accepted to, one of them was his number 1 school. So he didn't even care about the 5th one anymore. So I wanted to share where he has decided to go to college.
Boomer Sooner, Boomer Sooner. That's right. Oh, that comes over and over. Your favorite, right? Being a UT grad.
Yeah, I mean, you can see like right behind me here where my diploma came from. But this kid loves meteorology. And when he got his acceptance package, and there's like a picture of where the College of Atmospheric and Geographic Sciences is. And he goes, "Do you know what that is?" And I said, "Yes, that's the College of Atmospheric and Geographic Sciences." He goes, "That's the National Weather Center." And I said, "The National Weather Center is on the OU campus?" And he's like, "Yes." So, that's amazing.
So,
he's in tornadoes.
Congratulations. So there's an area of upper level pressure that's pushing through the boundary, something like that. Is that what is he practiced like that in the mirror?
No, but he doesn't want to be on TV.
Oh, okay. Just
PhD. He wants to be behind the scenes, developing all the weather models.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool. All right. Well, congratulations. Congratulations.
That's my person.
I think you'll enjoy that color much better than burnt orange. So congratulations to the step up to Boomer Sooner off of a Longhorn. So really, really well deserved. I'm glad he aimed higher. So anyway, with that, let's get into a little bit. We talk about the holiday season being here. Today is going to be a gift for our listeners. I've got no doubt about it. Couldn't have picked a better guest for today's show. I've seen her personally create opportunities and then leverage her ability to influence others in an authentic way. So, Mary, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest today?
Absolutely. So our guest today is Rachel Hawley. She is a PharmD. She got her Doctor of Pharmacy degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2023. And during pharmacy school, she gained experience as an inpatient pharmacy technician. She completed a regulatory affairs internship at Regeneron. She's really driven by a passion for science, a desire to make a broad impact. And so Rachel pursued a fellowship in the pharmaceutical industry, where all of that is possible. She was actually the inaugural U.S. Medical Affairs Fellow for Alnylam Pharmaceuticals. She supports, or had in this fellowship role, she supported medical strategy, field medical initiatives, and Rachel is now in a really cool role that I think everybody will really enjoy hearing about if we can get a chance to get into some of that. But she's a health systems medical outcome science liaison still with Alnylam, and she is partnering with the integrated delivery networks in the Northeast to advance disease education and improve patient access to care.
That's right.
And so really cool, because I'm a big fan of making an impact in social media and influencing and impacting other people and other people's careers in that way. So make a note, you guys. Rachel has been creating content on her own Instagram page, and it's at Industry PharmD, all smushed together, at Industry PharmD. And she's utilizing that platform to mentor and support students and other professionals who are exploring careers in the pharmaceutical industry. So welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary and Chad.
So Mary, Rachel was one of the first people that I got to interact with after my new employee orientation at Alnylam. And she's a bundle of energy. She always meets people with a smile. It's going to be really good. Rachel, I know we've talked about having you on, so thanks for making time to do it. So when we, as tradition here with MSL Lead Chronicles, we like to open the show really with what the key takeaways that our guest wants to make sure that our listeners get in case they have to hop off early or need to come back. What are some practical things that they can take away? So would you mind kicking us off with those?
Of course. 3 things that I would say have really helped me or impacted me early on in my career. The first being your own advocate. You will have people advocate for you, or you may, which is wonderful, but you may not. So just knowing how to advocate for yourself and what you need is so important, especially if you're early on in your career. The second would be giving yourself time to learn. Going from pharmacy school to industry. I know Mary mentioned that I had an internship in regulatory, but we know that's completely different from medical. And a lot of times people think that they're just going to be able to hit the ground running, and then they are met with imposter syndrome, or they just feel very lost early on. So that's something that I just constantly remind myself, and I remind others is, especially if you're a fellow or you're early on in your career, you need to take time to learn. And it's just so important. And the last is building relationships early. And that kind of ties back into having people to advocate for you. But building relationships early, that's really what I would say got me to where I am right now. And it also just makes work so much more enjoyable when I also have friendships with people like Chad and other people on my team. It just makes it all the world worthwhile. I love knowing what's going on in people's lives outside of work. And by building relationships early, it just makes the workday go a lot faster and more fun, and doesn't feel like work because I'm just hanging out with my friends.
Wow, that's a takeaway in itself right there at the end, right? Doesn't even feel like work. That is
bonus
the sweet
takeaway.
Spot. That's right. That is a bonus takeaway.
Bonus takeaway. Okay. If it's okay, if we can go ahead and get started on that first takeaway, being your own advocate. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about how you advocated for yourself to get into this fellowship role? The fellowship role with Alnylam, that is.
Yeah. So I guess I can do a little background on the fellowship process for those that aren't familiar. Most fellows come from, I would say, PharmD backgrounds, come from pharmacy school, but there are more PhD fellowships and MD fellowships out there. And the process could be a little different than what it is for residency, in that there's not a match program. So you do go through like a grueling amount of interviews. I applied for 10 programs. I calculated it once. I think it was between 20 and 30 total interviews. But people say like the fellowship interview process is probably the hardest interview process you'll ever get to go through, compared to, say, maybe like switching jobs as an MSL down the line. It might not be as taxing, or I hope it's not as taxing for people. But, like really had to advocate for myself while going through the process. Sometimes you need to put yourself out there, and it can be a little uncomfortable, or make yourself be a little bit vulnerable. But in the end, I knew Alnylam was where I wanted to be, and you kind of need to like gas yourself up and say like, these are the experiences I've had. This is why I'm so excited about it. And like say like, oh, you're my top choice and whatnot. I would say that was one way that I advocated for myself.
How many, so just in context, I'm thinking about like even with an MSL role or those, right? You could have 100 applicants or 200 applicants for this. So in context with, I'm learning a lot about the fellowship roles, and so will our listeners here, because we have variety, those that are trying to break into industry, those that are in executive level leadership roles too, that may be wanting to start fellowship roles within their own company. So just in context, like how many, do you even know how many people went through the fellowship interview process?
Yeah, so when I was recruiting our fellow last year, we had over 100 applicants for that one position. And my year so I was a Northeastern fellow. Northeastern University partners with a number of biotechs and pharma companies in the Boston, Cambridge area. And I think we had between like 3,000 and 4,000 applicants total. And it was like the 2% acceptance rate. And that's not individuals, but like the number of positions that were applied for. So it's getting more and more competitive, and you cannot be passive in the process. You really need to advocate for yourself, put yourself out there right from the get-go to be remembered. Yeah.
Well, I hear a lot how competitive these fellowships are, and how difficult they are to get, which is why someone having a fellowship like this on their resume, saying I'm putting on my recruiter hat, is a very big deal. And it doesn't really take the recruiter to tell the company, hey, this is a big deal that this person got chosen for this fellowship. But one thing I don't know, and maybe aspiring fellows may not realize, is why it's so difficult or why it's so challenging. Is it, and why it's so impressive? Is it the fellowship, what you're doing in the fellowship itself? Is it the process to get is it the number of people that apply? What the interview process, and what is it that makes this so prestigious to have attained?
I think it's a little bit of everything. One thing you said is just like the fellowship itself. I get people ask that are interested in going into industry someday. They're like, should I just do a direct to industry route outside, like just after pharmacy school? And I'm like, okay, what does that look like? Mary, you know how difficult it is to probably help people get MSL roles with no experience, but they have a ton of clinical experience. Coming fresh out of pharmacy school, like in my opinion, that, something really needs to align to make that happen. So maybe they go into, like, they work for a clinical research organization, or they're like a regulatory associate or something, but it's not super straightforward. And if their end goal is to maybe get into medical affairs or become an MSL, I think that would really take time. So I think a lot of people see the fellowship as an opportunity to get their foot in the door and really advance their career right from the get-go. And like, I can say that's true. I did not think I would be a medical outcome science liaison in less than 2 years since graduating from pharmacy school, but it was the fellowship program that really enabled me to be able to do that. So I think people just have like this sense of pressure. They know that this is a great way to launch their career, and it's competitive. Like the numbers. I was at ASHP this past week in New Orleans. And I was one of their social media ambassadors. And during the opening ceremony, I was sitting next to the dean at UConn School of Pharmacy, and like kind of telling him about my background as a fellow. And he was just voicing how the numbers have swayed so dramatically over the past few decades. Like when he was first dean, majority of his students were going into retail. And then there was a big shift to going into clinical. And now everybody wants to do industry. And I was like, why do you think that is? And he says, like, it's the work-life balance. It's the flexibility. Like my class was the one that we started off in person in pharmacy school. Then after a semester, COVID hit and we were online for years. And so we got to experience remote learning. I was also working in the hospital doing vaccine clinics once available. It was taxing. And I think my generation of pharmacists really were impacted by that.
But is there some serendipity to that, though? the remote learning, making it easier for you to transition or get it, I guess, in a way?
Totally. It's not, people, they hear remote work and they're like, oh, that's easy. No, it's not. Like, in some ways, I feel like, getting up, getting dressed, going into the office, like you build a routine. It's not the same being remote. I would say it's a lot harder to get up and put yourself together and really, build yourself a schedule and stick to it on a day-to-day basis. I'm fortunate to be close to the office, which like forces me to build in a routine. But I would say people that are entirely remote, like that's a whole new thing to learn. And by experiencing that in pharmacy school, I think it really helped my generation start to build those like personal skills, life skills.
That's really interesting. I didn't think about it in that way. And you're right, though, Rachel. I think one of the things, just in my observation, leading teams, that's one of the most difficult things is creating a sense of structure. They're either good at at communicating science, they're good at relationships, but now how do you manage the day to day if you don't have that routine? And even thinking about that, you're the first one that comes to Alnylam in the inaugural position. You start this brand new role for a company that I'm assuming actually had much less structure when compared to pharmacy school, right? So where there's curriculum and structure. So tell us about your experience when you walked in, what you thought it was going to be, and then did it match the reality?
In some ways, I didn't, since I was the inaugural fellow, I didn't have a first year fellow before me, or I didn't have a second year fellow that recruited me. And in some ways, I think that was an advantage because I didn't have someone that I was comparing myself to and seeing where they were in their career and what they were doing after a year. I had no one to compare myself to. So I was only comparing myself to myself. But on the flip side, I didn't have that person to like go to when it was just like a simple technical question or like navigating a relationship with my preceptor. I didn't have like that middle person to kind of like lead me and assist me when I was starting off. But I'm a glass half full kind of person. So I tried to see it, as an advantage. And can you repeat what your initial question was? Because now I'm wandering off. But
No, so just the adjustment from going to something that you have a pharmacy school where there's structure every month, every week is lined out, all these things. You can look at it at the very beginning and know what it's going to be like. And then it's almost becomes like a choose your own adventure in ways too. So understanding, did you walk into realizing that, or did you have to adapt quickly? More of that. That was more around the question.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that?
Yeah, so I didn't know what I was necessarily walking into, and my entire team was like remote, and nobody on my team worked in the office. My preceptor lived in a different country, so I really needed to be creative when it came to, setting up a schedule and finding some structure. And I really think that's where like building relationships early came into play, because I was still going into the office every day. My team was like, you don't have to go into the office. Like, we're not there. But I was like, no, I want to go into the office and I want to see people and make these connections in person. So that in itself really helped with the structural component. Also having co-fellows. So I wasn't alone. I'm one of 8. We're all in different functional areas, but being able to share the experience with others and kind of understand what they were doing, I think helped inspire me to figure out what I wanted to do. But yeah, like early on, it was just a lot of onboarding and, learning a brand new set of diseases that we never learned about in pharmacy school, because many of them are ultra rare diseases. And, at first you feel like you're not really doing much because you're kind of just learning and not necessarily working on projects. It doesn't feel like you're making much of an impact or moving the needle, but it comes into my other takeaway. Like, you need to give yourself time to learn and build a really strong foundation before you can be successful. So yeah, that's what I would say. Not much structure to begin with, but I'm that kind of person that needs structure. That's how I operate. So I think I default to like organizing things and putting together a schedule.
But you took it in your own hands too, right? That goes back to that whole thing about taking initiative and That's probably one of the reasons why that you set yourself apart from others too. I think that many times we're afraid, and even we create environments where there's a fear of failure versus a freedom in that. And so I love that you were able to do that. And I mean, you made your impact. You were very strategic, not only in the things that you've done for the company, but then even how you were going to advance and to make lemonade out of lemons in ways too, right? Like you were going to go in the office because you had you had that thought, right, about how can I leverage this in an authentic way, right? But to help fulfill your needs. And then really to help fuel you as well too. So let's go ahead and get into that second takeaway about giving yourself time to learn. Mary, why don't you ask her a few questions?
Yes, and this is a big one for me, and I think this is so applicable to everybody, as well as in this particular scenario, because I am a big believer in that people need to give themselves grace. They need to not. They need to be realistic and set themselves some realistic timelines. So, why do you feel like it was crucial to give yourself some time to learn, in starting this new career in medical affairs?
Like I said, we didn't learn about these diseases in pharmacy school. And one, I think that's like the beauty of industry, especially in biotech, that has some products for rare diseases. I think if we're going into industry because we want to be lifelong learners, and that's a really exciting thing, but it can also be intimidating. And you're like, I should already know these things. I see people out in the field, they're having these really great conversations, they're bringing back these insights, but you really can't do that if you don't have that foundational knowledge. And I remember I was kind of going through this process with some of my other fellows in medical affairs, and we're learning these new disease states, and they were talking about feeling like they had imposter syndrome. They're like, my team has, like, they're experts on this. They are thinking high level and strategically. And I'm like, guys, like, this is new to us. Like, we're fellows. Like, the point of being a fellow is to learn. I'm like, I never felt like I had imposter syndrome because I didn't feel like I was an imposter. Like, I knew that I needed to give myself some grace and take that time. And I would say it took like 6 months to really feel like I was getting in my groove. You need to hear information, especially when you're joining a new company and learning a new therapeutic area, learning new treatment options, therapeutic landscapes. Like, you really need to hear that information over and over again and really engage with it. You can't be passive about it. Like, setting up calls with other MSLs or like medical directors to learn their thoughts, ask questions. Again, just being vulnerable. Like, it's not embarrassing to not know. Like, they know you necessarily do not know, and yeah, it took like 6 months to really, I feel like, understand and engage, to be at that point where I felt like I could, okay, like, now I feel a little bit more comfortable, and like I can work on these projects that are moving the needle. And I was like very comfortable with that timeline, but I feel like a lot of people are like, no, I need to get this right away. And that's just not the case.
I think we all admit to ourselves that nobody has it all figured out. We have some things figured out, and that's how we leaders can help teach other leaders. How did you find a way to manage that overwhelming feeling of when you're drinking from the fire hose, but it sounds like you kind of went into it in a way that you kind of had it figured out. So maybe more for our listeners, for people who are aspiring to get into this fellowship program and don't know what's okay and what's not okay to already know, what advice would you give them?
I'm thinking back to what my experience was like. And I think serendipitously, I kind of got lucky, or it just worked out, but we can learn from this. But I was onboarding at the same time one of our new MSLs was onboarding. So I knew, or I saw that they were going through the training process from start to finish. And again, I was like, can I join those meetings? I don't think at that point it was built for fellows to have their own onboarding process, like it was for MSLs. But I knew a new MSL was starting, and I think I was talking to one of the trainers and they mentioned that these calls were happening. And I was like, can I get on those calls? And then it happened again this year. We had new MSLs joining. And I was like, I know how helpful that was for me last year. And I know all these new fellows are also going to be interacting with these disease states and products. Even fellows that were going into pharmacovigilance, into clinical development. So they weren't in the field talking necessarily to these people on a day-to-day basis. But I was like, can you add all of these people to those calls? And if they can make it fabulous, but I know how helpful it was for me to just be a fly on the wall and listen. And I was like, I want to have this set up for them all to have that opportunity too. They wouldn't have known these calls were happening if, not saying I'm the reason, but I was like, I know how helpful it was for me to be there. And I wanted everyone to have that same like level setting opportunity.
Just listening. Yeah. Just listening to that, Rachel. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, it's killing multiple or two birds with one stone, I guess. Maybe that's the way to think about it. I mean, you're thinking about it not only to support yourself, not to be able to even think about advancing projects and things for the company, but you're also thinking about the benefit for the company as well too, the experience that all the other fellows are going to receive, helping build that bigger picture and that surround sound, if you will, from the very beginning as well too. So you're already making impact and establishing that with the company. So out of that, can you talk about any of the projects, or did you have any opportunities within Alnom to really kind of help set yourself apart over the past couple of years? Talk about that.
I'd say like one of the big projects I got to be involved in early on was creating a new like field asset for our MSL and Mosel teams about a certain subset of patients with a hereditary form of disease. And it was a great project to have first, because I'm the type of learner that, like most, I don't do well just hearing it, or I don't do well just seeing it. I'm a kinesthetic learner. So actually engaging with data and building this field asset was, I think, very, very beneficial to have early on. So it was a DSA deck about a certain subset of hereditary patients with this disease. And I got to work on it with one of our medical directors, which, again, building relationships early on allowed me to do that. And it was a project I got to see from start to finish. I think that's sometimes a hard thing, is jumping on a project in the middle or only seeing the final product, but kind of being able to be in the early development stages, then the creation stage, and then wrapping it up with actually training the field teams on how to use it and answer any questions that they have. It was a really full circle project right off the bat, and I got to learn a ton throughout it. And then I got to engage with so many people within field medical training, medical directors right from the get-go. And that helped me from a personal perspective figure out what I liked and what I was interested in. So that was one project.
Serious.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You establish yourself, you give yourself a chance to be able to show kind of how you think about things, and from beginning to end with a company. They get to see your scientific acumen, all of those things wrapped up into one. So that's really that's important, I think, as well too. It's that full, giving people the full picture of all the different capabilities that you have, from a social, from a scientific, learning, all of those types of things, to be able to fully take a step back. Well, I guess what I'm trying to think or say succinctly would be to be able to see it from the micro, if you will, and then the macro as well too. And it's important to be able to look at through different lenses. And so that was really impressive how you were able to do that, and not just get focused on the details. You were able to see how that would impact. So let's thinking about that. You mentioned something about the medical director, right? And the relationships. You mentioned earlier about choosing to go in-house to actually, when you didn't have to, you could have worked from a virtual standpoint. You wanted to build those. So talk about building those relationships early. How did you go about building them with your cross-functional colleagues, both whether it's within medical or even beyond? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I know when some people have a second year fellow, they give them this massive list of people that they should like reach out to. Like, here's their emails. I didn't have that, but I knew how important that was. So not rocket science, but I literally just looked at the org chart and wrote down names, did some LinkedIn stalking, tried to figure out who would be the most like important person to meet with at this point. I don't know. I just tried to be strategic about it and not like overwhelm myself and overwhelm other people. But yeah, like I really just like looked at the org charts and tried to piece together who works with who and kind of put together a diverse list of people that I wanted to connect with at different points in my fellowship. And then it kind of snowballs because then you meet with them, you share what your interests are, what your background is. And then they're like, oh, have you talked to so-and-so yet? And it just kind of snowballs and allows you to meet a variety of people. And then there's just some people that you click with. And then you have these like great friendships going too. And they're like one of my best friends at work. We like grew up in the same area. We went to different places for pharmacy school. But we like were at a conference together one time and we found out we were in the same sorority. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like sorority girl scream just like erupted. And
I do that all the time. So anyway, go ahead.
yeah, but and like she's also in medical, but she's on our omni-channel team. And like I probably like when starting off my fellowship, I probably would have been like, omni-channel, I'm not really sure what that is, and maybe it seems like a little too niche, and I'm not gonna like explore that. But it just so happened like we formed this connection, and then we just started having like recurring one-on-ones, and she would be telling me about her projects and like asked me to get involved, and I was able to get some like omni-channel experience early on as well. So I don't know. I was a camp counselor. I was a camper for 12 years. So like forming relationships and finding common ground with people is so important. It's something that I really value and enjoy. And I think that's really helped, build connections and relationships with coworkers because, the company and the science brings you together. But like Chad, we have cats, like it gives us something else to talk about. And yeah, it just makes it more enjoyable.
I'm going to turn it over to Mary real quick here in just a second. But Rachel, promise me one thing that you, no matter how far along you get in your career, that you'll maintain that level of curiosity. I can tell you that's the number one trait that I've always looked for when hiring people is that, I mean, why as we age, we feel like we can't ask questions or we feel like we should know it all versus continuing to do that. That is the theme that I'm hearing. You're very curious, like your cats, I guess, maybe in ways. And you want to know not only how to be able to connect those dots within people or within the organization, but then even it helps advance your learning about what you want to do. Like I just after having conversations with you, I feel like you have a clear sense of what you want to do, and you're only a couple of years out of pharmacy school. It took me multiple years to kind of figure out kind of the direction I wanted to go. I've had multiple lefts and rights to get me where I am today.
The first thing I wanted to say is I loved your example about getting onto an onboarding call. And I really felt like that traversed all three of your takeaways. You advocated for yourself. And it was your opportunity to give yourself some time to learn. And you were building relationships at the same time with people you maybe weren't working with day to day. I mean, maybe the MSLs, but, getting onto an onboarding call with pharmacovigilance or something else. Anyway, I thought that was genius. So again, people who are already in a fellowship or considering applying for one, I think these are great lessons for you all to take from what Rachel has been sharing.
Heck, if you're an MSL, even if you're an MSL, right? I mean, regardless of role, I mean, I think if you haven't done that, I mean, that is key. So to be able to do it as a fellow is even better.
And I think it absolutely demonstrates to your employer, whether it's during a finite fellowship time frame or, an MSL or whatever, that you're dedicated and this matters. And I think that's so important. A couple of things I wanted to talk about or ask you about around the third, and then also the bonus takeaway that you shared at the beginning. So what advice would you give to somebody who is trying to build a strong network within their organization early in their career?
I would say just, setting up one-on-ones and make them recurring, like either monthly. It doesn't need to be often. But you want to come prepared. I think the fellowship process is awesome because as fellows, I'm on medical. We have a value and evidence strategy fellow. We have a marketing fellow. And by being a part of a cohort that is diverse, that allows us to talk to each other, but then also tap into their networks too. And maybe that's a unique part of the fellowship that when people are like onboarding as an MSL, they don't have. But you do go to onboarding sessions or like the orientation session, and you have a variety of people there. So if it is like day one and you're on site starting a new role as an MSL at a company, really taking the time to learn about the other people in that room, whether they're a sales representative or they're a new clinical scientist, and establishing those connections in person, and then like maintaining them somehow. And the big thing is meeting with people that maybe don't seem 100% aligned in what your daily goals and what your defined role is, because having those connections in other areas is so valuable. Like in the field, we get questions about like safety, all the time, and having a connection, having a safety scientist friend that I can go to and ask, like, do we have this data published somewhere, or do you have any idea of who I can connect with to learn more about this? Like, it just makes the role so much easier.
So you said two things there. Number one, it goes back to the whole micro and macro type of thing. I think about industry maybe as a big jigsaw puzzle, right? And so when people get into it, we do a really good job of looking at the micro. We look at what our role, responsibility, and doing that, but it's a both and, right? You were looking to see how all these things connect together in ways, right? It helps inform your job, and helps inform your career path, and all those, and then it also provides that relational context as well too for when you need things in your role too. So it's a win-win. So again, the curiosity and looking at the bigger picture, and giving yourself time to do that. I think that was really that was something that really resonated that you shared. So thank you for doing that. You talked also about something about social media, and I don't know if our listeners know. I mean, you're an influencer. So tell us a little bit about how and why you started that. Love to hear more about what you're doing on social media.
So I think a lot of people, when I'm talking to pharmacy students that are interested in industry, they say, my school is clinically focused. And I'm like, yeah, it should be. It's pharmacy school. Like it's supposed to be clinically focused. Like a lot of pharmacists go into working in hospital, clinic setting, ambulatory care setting roles. In Wisconsin is no different. And I learned pretty early on that I wanted to do something outside of the clinical setting and kind of work upstream of patient care, and got curious about industry pretty early on when I was in pharmacy school. But when I was going through this process, trying to learn more, I felt like there weren't a ton of resources out there. So it was about the time that I was graduating that I was like, I really enjoy curating content and making posts. Like, it's a fun, creative outlet for me. And I feel like I have some pearls of wisdom and, experience that I could share from my fellowship experience, like going through the interview and application process. And so I was like, you know what, like maybe I'll just make an Instagram account and share what I learned and have it be a fun way for me to document my experience. There was not really a ton of strategy behind it, but I was like, I could have used something like this when I was going through the process. So why don't I try to be that person and make that content for somebody else? And it kind of just developed organically. There were a couple other creators that were also new fellows that were in that space. but one of them was in marketing and one of them was in regulatory. So we kind of covered all the different bases. And yeah, it's just been really fun and really rewarding so far. And people ask, like, how do you make the time? And, it doesn't feel like I'm taking up time. Like I said, this is a fun, creative outlet for me. I don't necessarily like plan content. It's all very spur of the moment. Like an idea comes into my head. I'm like, let's get that down on paper. I really try to engage with my followers and see like what questions they have, like what kind of things I can create to support them. And I have a ton of fun with it. And I was just in mid-year and getting to meet all these people in person, and they're like hearing how helpful the like me answering a question for them was, or a specific post was for them, is so rewarding, because for me, it doesn't feel like it doesn't take much time or energy. Well, sometimes it does, but it doesn't feel like a ton of work. It's fun for me. But then for them to like say, wow, like without you, I would have been so lost throughout this process. It's awesome. So I absolutely love it.
And I just want to mention, because that was a perfect segue to this one post that I wanted to talk about. If you're down, or if you're feeling like you're being hard on yourself, you need to get onto this. Again, it's at Industry PharmD on Instagram. This particular post that I'm talking about, if you're having a rough day, it's pinned towards the top and you need to see it. It says, this is your reminder to give yourself some credit for how far you've come.
I have it pinned for a reminder to myself. Yeah.
Well, I can use it too. So
love it.
How big is your following, Rachel, at this point? And again, it's not an opportunity. I know you're not being boastful. I'm just curious.
I have a little over 2,000 followers.
Wow, that's fantastic. And you started this when, Rachel?
I would say around May of 2023.
So this has been focused primarily on is it primarily around the fellowship process?
Yeah.
Where do you see it going? Where would you like to take it next?
I think
or can you share with us?
Yeah. I try to keep it really authentic and organic, but I think it'll, grow and transform as I grow throughout my career. So like right now, a lot of my content is focused on how to get a fellowship, how to find internships for people in school. Because, like those are experiences that I have and I feel confident speaking to and supporting. So then maybe down the line, it would transform into, okay, now you're in your career and you've been in industry for a couple of years. Like, how do you explore other opportunities or make career pivots? It'll kind of, I think, mirror whatever's going on in my life. And you said influencer, and I feel like I'm not trying to necessarily influence people to do something, but more so be like a mentor or inspire. And I don't think people call them people call it mentorship or inspirer, but just kind of share my experience. And there's going to be people along the way in which that resonates with them.
I think as long as you're
mention for people, I'm sorry, there is a fellowship toolkit.
Oh yeah,
linked to her Instagram page. That will help you get ready for your industry fellowship. I can't say enough. If you're not following this woman's page, you should.
Even leaders, right, within industry. I mean, you think about having a toolkit. You're thinking about maybe even developing or starting that. What a great resource to even get you thinking through the process. Rachel, this has been an eye-opening conversation for me. I've learned a lot of things in our hour together. Mary, any additional questions or thoughts from you?
Not right now, because I could probably spend another 2 hours talking to you and picking your brain and asking you for advice on how to organize my life, because it sounds like you've got that together and I don't. So not right now.
Rachel, what about you? Anything you want to close out with?
I just want to thank you both for having me and for, having these conversations with people. Like ever since I heard that Chad had this podcast, and I think it's so important for us as professionals in industry to like have that outside outlet Like mine is my Instagram page, yours is this podcast and network, but it just helps you connect with so many people from different walks of life and different areas. And like for listeners too, trying to find that thing, whether that be like a professional organization that you're involved with, but finding a way to develop yourself and your network outside of work is something that I've found to be incredibly valuable. So I just want to thank both of you for having this platform and for having so many diverse people come on, because it's so beneficial for me, driving to the office or driving to a field call. I love my music, but a podcast is even better,
That's well. And what is your favorite kind of music, Rachel? Out of curiosity.
Ooh, I really like indie singer-songwriter, but then I'm also a Swiftie. So, yeah.
Okay. Who's your favorite indie band?
Ooh, there's a brother and sister duo called Angus and Julia Stone. They're from Australia. I really love them.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to send me a playlist or something. I've not listened to them before.
Yeah,
I love it.
I've actually seen them at Austin City Limits Festival.
That's amazing. I'm jealous.
Wow, y'all gonna have to catch up and talk a little bit more on the side at some point. Yeah. Rachel, we're gonna, if you will, at some point, would love to continue to stay connected with you, have you back on this. I think just your ability to inspire others, to continue to find ways to lead and develop others, to develop yourself as well too. You're not saying you have all the answers. Matter of fact, you want to find those, and you want to leverage your network, continue to build that out. And so can't wait to have you back on the podcast. I think that will wrap things up for today. Thanks so much, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles. Remember, leaders don't develop in isolation. Leaders learn from leaders. And with that, we will see you next time.
Is the holly that will be on your own front door. A pair of hop-along boots and a pistol that shoots is the wish of Barney and Ben. Dolls that'll talk and we'll go for a walk is the hope of Janice and Jen.